Set, the deity. Sutek, or Seth with an H, Coptic, is a god of deserts, storms, disorder, violence, and foreigners in ancient Egyptian religion. In ancient Greek, the god's name is given as Seth, Seth. Set had a positive role where he accompanied Ra on his bark to repel Apep or Apopus, the serpent of chaos. Set had a vital role as a reconciled combatant. He was lord of the Red Land or the desert, where he was the balance to Horus's role as lord of the Black Land or the fertile land. In the Osiris myth, the most important Egyptian myth, Set is portrayed as the usurper who murdered and mutilated his own brother Osiris. Osiris's sister wife Isis reassembled his corpse and resurrected her dead brother husband with the help of the goddess Nephthys. The resurrection lasted long enough to conceive his son and heir, Horus. Horus sought revenge upon Set, and many of the ancient Egyptian myths describe their conflicts. The family. Set is the son of Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. His siblings are Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys. He married the latter, and though it has commonly been assumed that they were the parents of Anubis, some Egyptologists, such as Hermann Tevelde, have doubted whether Set was ever regarded as Anubis' father in ancient Egyptian religion, Osiris being the father of this god instead. Set also had relationships with foreign goddesses Anat and Astarte in some accounts. From these relationships is said to be born a crocodile deity called Maja or Maga. Name origin. The meaning of the name Set is unknown, but it is thought to have been originally pronounced Suti, based on spellings of his name in Egyptian hieroglyphs as STH and SWTH. The late Egyptian spelling STS reflects the palatalization of H, while the eventual loss of the final consonant is regarded in spellings like SWTJ. The Coptic form of the name CHT or Set is the basis for the English vocalization. The Set animal. In art, Set is usually depicted as an enigmatic creature referred to by Egyptologists as Set the animal, a beast not identified with any known animal, although it could be seen as resembling a saluki, an aardvark, an African wild dog, a donkey, a hyena, a jackal, a pig, an antelope, a giraffe, or a fennec fox. The animal has a downward curving snout, long ears with squared off ends, a thin forked tail with sprouted fur tufts in an inverted arrow shape, and a slender canine body. Sometimes Set is depicted as a human with the distinctive head. Some early Egyptologists proposed that it was a stylized representation of the giraffe owing to the large flat-topped horns which correspond to a giraffe's ossicones. The Egyptians themselves, however, used distinct depictions for the giraffe and the Set animal. During the late period, Set is usually depicted as a donkey or as a man with the head of a donkey, and in the Book of the Fayum, Set is depicted with a flamingo head. The earliest representations of what might be the Set animal comes from a tomb dating to the Ambracian culture, Naqada I of prehistoric Egypt, 3790 to 3500 BCE, although this identification is uncertain. If these are ruled out, then the earliest Set animal appears on a ceremonial mace head of Scorpion II, a ruler of the Naqada III phase. The head and the forked tail of the Set animal are clearly present on the mace. Conflict of Horus and Set. An important element of Set's mythology was his conflict with his brother or nephew Horus for the throne of Egypt. The contest between them is often violent, but is also described as a legal judgment before the Ennead, an assembled group of Egyptian deities, to decide who should inherit the kingship. The judge in this trial may be Geb, who, as the father of Osiris and Set, held the throne before they did, or it may be the creator gods Ra or Atum, the originators of kingship. Other deities also take important roles. Thoth frequently acts as a conciliator in the dispute or as an assistant to the divine judge. And in contendings, Isis uses her cunning and magical power to aid her son. The rivalry of Horus and Set is portrayed in two contrasting ways. Both perspectives appear as early as the pyramid text, the earliest source of the myth. In some spells from these texts, Horus is the son of Osiris and nephew of Set, and the murder of Osiris is the major impetus for the conflict. The other tradition depicts Horus and Set as brothers. This incongruity persists in many of the subsequent sources where the two gods may be called brothers or uncle and nephew at different points in the same text. The divine struggle involves many episodes. Contendings describes the two gods appealing to various other deities to arbitrate the dispute and competing in different types of contests, such as racing in boats or fighting each other in the form of hippopotami to determine a victor. In this account, Horus repeatedly defeats Set and is supported by most of the other deities. Yet the dispute drags on for 80 years, largely because of the judge, the creator god, favors Set. In late ritual texts, the conflict is characterized as a great battle involving the two deities' assembled followers. The strife in the divine realm extends beyond the two combatants. At one point, Isis attempts to harpoon Set as he is locked in combat with her son, but strikes Horus instead, who then cuts off her head in a fit of rage. Thoth replaces Isis's head with that of a cow. The story gives a mythical origin for the cow horn headdress that Isis commonly wears. In a key episode in the conflict, Set sexually abuses Horus. Set's violation is partly meant to degrade his rival, but it also involves homosexual desire. In keeping with one of Set's major characteristics, his forceful, potent, and indiscriminate sexuality. In the earliest account of this episode, in a fragmentary Middle Kingdom papyrus, the sexual encounter begins when Set asks to have sex with Horus, who agrees on the condition that Set will give Horus some of his strength. The encounter puts Horus in danger because in Egyptian tradition, semen is a potent and dangerous substance akin to poison. According to some texts, Set's semen enters Horus's body and makes him ill, but in contendings, Horus thwarts Set by catching Set's semen in his hands, ill. Isis retaliates by putting Horus's semen on lettuce leaves that Set eats, ill. Set's defeat becomes apparent when this semen appears on his forehead as a golden disc. He has been impregnated with his rival's seed and as a result gives birth to the disc. In contendings, Thoth takes the disc and places it on his own head. In earlier accounts, it is Thoth who is produced by this anomalous birth. Another important episode concerns mutilations that the combatants inflict upon each other. Horus injures or steals Set's testicles, and Set damages or tears one out or occasionally both of Horus's eyes. Sometimes the eye is torn into pieces. Set's mutilation signifies a loss of virility and strength. The removal of Horus's eye is even more important, for this stolen eye of Horus represents a wide variety of concepts in Egyptian religion. One of Horus's major roles is as a sky deity, and for this reason his right eye was said to be the sun and his left eye the moon. The theft or destruction of the eye of Horus is therefore equated with the darkening of the moon in the course of its cycle of phases or during eclipses. Horus may take back his lost eye, or other deities, including Isis, Thoth, and Hathor, may retrieve or heal it for him. Egyptologist Herman T. de Velde argues that the tradition about the lost testicles is a late variation on Set's loss of semen to Horus, and that the moon-like disc that emerges from Set's head after his impregnation is the eye of Horus. If so, the episodes of mutilation and sexual abuse would form a single story, in which Set assaults Horus and loses semen to him. Horus retaliates and impregnates Set, and Set comes into possession of Horus's eye when it appears on Set's head. Because Thoth is a moon deity, in addition to his other functions, it would make sense, according to Tevelde, for Thoth to emerge in the form of the eye and step in to mediate between the feuding deities. In any case, the restoration of the eye of Horus to wholeness represents the return of the moon to full brightness, the return of the kingship to Horus, and many other aspects of Ma'at. Sometimes the restoration of Horus's eye is accompanied by the restoration of Set's testicles, so that both gods are made whole near the conclusion of their feud. Protector of Ra. Set was depicted standing on the prow of Ra's barge, defeating the dark serpent Apep in some late period representations, such as in the Persian period temple of Hibis at Karga. Set was represented in this role with a falcon's head, taking on the guise of Horus. In the Amduat, Set is described as having a key role in overcoming Apep. Set in the Second Intermediate, Ramesside, and later periods. During the Second Intermediate period, 1650 to 1550 BCE, a group of Near Eastern peoples known as the Hyksos, literally rulers of foreign lands, gained control of Lower Egypt and ruled the Nile Delta from avarice. They chose Set, originally Upper Egypt's chief god, the god of foreigners, and the god they found most similar to their own chief god Hadad, as their patron. Set then became worshipped as the chief god once again. The Hyksos king Apapus is recorded as worshipping Set exclusively, as described in the following passage. King Apapus chose for his lord the god Seth. He did not worship any other deity in the whole land except Seth. That is from the Quarrel of Apapus and Sequenir, Papyrus Salier I. Jan Assmann argues that because the ancient Egyptians could never conceive of a lonely god lacking personality, Set, the desert god who was worshipped on his own, represented a manifestation of evil. When Ahmose I overthrew the Hyksos and expelled them in 1522 BCE, Egyptians' attitudes towards Asiatic foreigners became xenophobic, and royal propaganda discredited the period of Hyksos rule. The Set cult at Avaris flourished nevertheless, and the Egyptian garrison of Ahmose stationed there became part of the priesthood of Set. The founder of the 19th dynasty, Ramesses I, came from a military family from Avaris with strong ties to the priesthood of Set. Several of the Ramesside kings were named after the god, most notably Seti I, literally man of Set, and Set Nocht, literally Set is strong. In addition, one of the garrisons of Ramesses II hailed Set as its patron deity, and Ramesses II erected the so-called Year 400 stela at Pi Ramesses, commemorating the 400th anniversary of the Set cult in the Nile Delta. In ancient Egyptian astronomy, Set was commonly associated with the planet Mercury. Set also became associated with foreign gods during the New Kingdom, particularly in the Delta. Set was identified by the Egyptians with the Hittite deity Teshub, who, like Set, was a storm god, and the Canaanite deity Baal, being worshipped together as Seth Baal. Additionally, Set is depicted in part of the Greek magical papyri, a body of text forming a grimoire used in Greco-Roman magic during the 4th century CE. The demonization of Set. According to Herman Tevelde, the demonization of Set took place after Egypt's conquest by several foreign nations in the 3rd Intermediate and Late periods. Set, who had traditionally been the god of foreigners, thus also became associated with foreign oppressors, including the Kushite and Persian empires. It was during this time that Set was particularly vilified and his defeat by Horus widely celebrated. Set's negative aspects were emphasized during this period. Set was the killer of Osiris, having hacked Osiris's body into pieces and dispersed it so that he could not be resurrected. The Greeks would later associate Set with Typhon and Yahweh, a monstrous and evil force of raging nature, being the three of them depicted as donkey-like creatures, classifying their worshippers as onolatrous. Set and Typhon also had in common that both were sons of deities representing the earth, Gaia and Geb, who attacked the principal deities, Osiris for Set, Zeus for Typhon. Nevertheless, throughout this period, in some outlying regions of Egypt, Set was still regarded as the heroic chief deity. Ancient Egyptologist Dr. Kara Cooney shot an episode called The Birth of the Devil in the Out of Egypt documentary series. In this documentary, the scientist describes the process of demonization of Set and the positioning of it as absolute evil on the opposite side, in parallel with the transition to monotheism in different regions from Rome to India, where God began to be perceived as the representative of absolute goodness. Set temples. Set was worshipped at the temples of Ombus, Nut near Nakata, and Ombus, Nut near Kam Ombo at Oxyrhynchus in Middle Egypt, and also in part of the Fayum area. More specifically, Set was worshipped in the relatively large metropolitan yet provincial locale of Sepermuru, especially during the Ramesside period. There, Set was honored with an important temple called the House of Set, Lord of Sepermeru. One of the epithets of this town was Gateway to the Desert, which fits well with Set's role as a deity of the frontier regions of ancient Egypt. At Sepermeru, Set's temple enclosure included a small secondary shrine called the House of Seth. Powerful is his mighty arm, and Ramesses II himself built or modified a second land-owning temple for Nephthys called the House of Nephthys of Ramesses Meriamun. The two temples of Set and Nephthys in Sepermeru were under separate administration, each with its own holdings and profits. Moreover, another moderately sized temple of Set is noted for the nearby town of Pi Waina. The close association of Set temples with temples of Nephthys in key outskirt towns of this milieu is also reflected in the likelihood that there existed another House of Set and another House of Nephthys in the town of Su at the entrance to the Fayum. Papyrus Bologna preserves a most irritable complaint lodged by one Praamhab, prophet of the House of Set in the now lost town of Punojum, the Sweet Place. In the text of Papyrus Bologna, the harried Priam-Hab laments undue taxation for his own temple, the house of Set, and goes on to lament that he is also saddled with responsibility for the ship, and I am likewise also responsible for the house of Nephthys, along with the remaining heap of district temples. Nothing is known about the particular theologies of the closely connected Seth and Nephthys temples in these districts. For example, the religious tone of temples of Nephthys located in such proximity to those of Set, especially given the seemingly contrary Osirian loyalties of Set's consort goddess. When by the 20th dynasty the demonization of Set was ostensibly inaugurated, Set was either eradicated or increasingly pushed to the outskirts. Nephthys flourished as part of the usual Osirian pantheon throughout Egypt, even obtaining a late period status as tutelary goddess of her own nome, UU Nome 7, Hut Sechem Diospolus Parva, and as the chief goddess of the mansion of the sistrum in that district. Set's cult persisted even into the latter days of ancient Egyptian religion in outlying but important places like Karga, Dakhla, Deir el-Hagar, Mut, and Kelis. In these places, Set was considered lord of the oasis or town, and Nephthys was likewise venerated as mistress of the oasis at Set's side in his temples, especially the dedication of a Nephthys cult statue. Meanwhile, Nephthys was also venerated as mistress in the Osirian temples of these districts as part of the specifically Osirian college. It would appear that the ancient Egyptians in these locales had little problem with the paradoxical dualities inherent in venerating Set and Nephthys as juxtaposed against Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys. In modern religion, Set in modern religious context is recognized primarily through Kemeticism and the Temple of Set. Kemeticism, a modern revival of ancient Egyptian religion, acknowledges Set as a complex deity associated with chaos, storms, and warfare, yet also protector against the serpent Apep. The Temple of Set, founded in 1975, venerates Set as a figure of isolation and self-deification, emphasizing personal enlightenment and the exploration of the left-hand path. In popular culture, in the television series Doctor Who, Set, using the name Sutekh and portrayed by Gabriel Wolf, is depicted as an alien entity bent on destroying all life. He first appears in the 1975 serial Pyramids of Mars, where he schemes to escape an Egyptian pyramid he has been imprisoned in millennia ago by Horus. Sutekh returned after nearly 50 years in the 2024 Series 14 two-part finale, The Legend of Ruby Sunday / Empire of Death, as the god of death in the pantheon. In recent digital reinterpretations of mythical figures, Set has appeared in small-scale mythology documentation websites and community archives.